happened. But nowadays, all it would take was one person with a cell phone and a YouTube account, and any hope for them having normal lives would have been lost. Everyone would know they were demons. Greedy people would be asking them for wealth, some people would be asking if their loved ones were in hell, and haters would simply be demanding they be destroyed somehow. He toyed with the carrot for a couple more seconds, then popped it in his mouth. It didn't taste as good as it had when he was mortal. He longed for the taste of a human soul, but for the moment such a delicacy wasn't on the menu. The worker smiled in satisfaction and moved on. Seal hoped he wouldn't have to deal with Janet's cooking for too long. After dinner, Seal and his shelter mates were permitted to listen to their radios or watch television in the main hall. Seal retrieved his portable radio from his rucksack. Putting on his headphones, he tuned into one of his and Sebastian's favorite radio programs, Old Harry's Game, and listened quietly with a thoughtful look on his face. It was one of Sebastian's favorite programs. Jack Ravensdale was on his fourth cup of coffee that night as he tried to think of a way to get Sebastian's citizenship and custody of his ward Seal. It would not be easy, but he had made a promise to his client and he would do everything he could to keep his promise. He went over a few casebooks on this subject, trying to find some precedent that he might present to a judge. "Have you found anything?" Sebastian asked from the sofa where he was looking over a few papers himself that were spread out over the coffee table. "Still looking," the lawyer told the demon. "I think we may just have to start from scratch. Tell them your birth certificate was lost somehow and try to obtain a new one." "Can we do that?" Sebastian asked. "You look about 25 to 27, Ravensdale estimated. I'll research hospital fires for those years. If we claim you were born at one of those hospitals, we might be able to obtain a birth certificate for you." "Then what?" Sebastian wanted to know. "Well, I'm going to check both local and non-local hospitals to give us a better chance of success," Ravensdale told him. "If the hospital we claim you were born at is local, then the next step is to apply for identification. If not, then there's the additional step of applying for citizenship. Either way, I'm afraid it'll be at least 4 months before we'll be ready for a custody hearing." Sebastian sighed. "So either way, I could lose custody of Seal permanently if someone in CPS were to decide to simply go ahead with an adoption. I'm going to ask the courts to grant a temporary injunction against that happening," Ravensdale told him. "There's no guarantee that the judge will grant one, but I promise I'll do whatever I can to help you keep your promise." "Thank you." Chapter 06, The Foster Care System and the Courts, Part 4. Sitting in the waiting room at the nationality checking service was not easy for Sebastian. Still, there was nothing for it. The only hospital fire Ravensdale had been able to find within the proper time period for when Sebastian would have been born were he really human had been in Australia's Crown Street Women's Hospital. Armed with the tale that he had been born there, and that his birth records had been lost in the fire that had occurred in September of 1984, they intended to begin the process of obtaining naturalization for Sebastian on the grounds that he had been living and working in England for several years. "Is there anyone we can contact who can confirm you've been here for at least 5 years?" Ravensdale had asked at his office that morning. Sebastian had thought about it for a moment, and groaned. There was one person left in the country who could vouch for him and Seal. "Yes," he had finally said. "His name is Grell Sutcliffe Wright. He lives in Islington with his husband Devon." "Well, he's not really his husband, it's just a civil union, but Grell had his name legally changed to add the right bit." And that was why Grell was now sitting in the nationality checking service reading a copy of Wellbeing Women's Mothers magazine that was at least a year old. "Still want children?" Sebastian asked quietly. "Actually, Devin and I have put in an application for adoption," Grell replied in a low tone. Sebastian still couldn't believe how much marriage, as Grell liked to refer to it, had tamed Grell. Devin had turned out to be a perfect match for the flamboyant Reaper. "I wish you the best of luck," Sebastian said as a desk clerk put down his phone and looked up. "Sebastian Michaelis," the clerk said. "Mr. Morgan will see you now." Sebastian, Ravensdale, and Grell stood up and walked over to the office door, which was being held open by a middle-aged man with ginger and white hair. "Mr. Michaelis?" Morgan asked. "I'm Richard Morgan. May I ask who these two gentlemen are?" "This is Mr. Jack Ravensdale, my solicitor, and my friend, Grell Sutcliffe Wright, who will vouch for my having been in your country for at least 5 years. "Very well," Morgan decided. "Won't you three come in?" "Thank you," Sebastian said as walked into the office, followed by Grell and Ravensdale. Once he was seated behind his desk, Morgan looked directly at Sebastian. "Why do you wish to obtain British citizenship?" "I have lived here since I was 5, and have served as a butler since I was 14, Sebastian said. "When I was 19, my parents and Seal's parents were killed. Before Seal's parents died, I promised I would take care of him." "That doesn't answer my question," Morgan said. "Why apply for citizenship and not simply a work visa?" "I want to adopt Seal," Sebastian replied. "He's in protective custody right now. He should be with me. To be unable to fulfill my promise to look after him would go against everything I believe in. I don't want this to be the first promise I've ever broken. It's too important." "I see," Morgan smiled. "Well, there's a bit of paperwork to be filed. You'll need to sign in all the appropriate locations, of course. Mind you, this does not grant you citizenship. This is merely the application for it. It'll take 6 weeks, then you must come in for the next step in the naturalization process." Sebastian took the forms, read them over carefully, and signed them. "And you, sir," Morgan said, turning to the page where Grell was to sign. Grell signed the paper and handed it back. "Well, that's all in order now," Morgan said. "I'll give your solicitor a call as soon as the paperwork is processed." "Thank you," Sebastian said, gratefully. Chapter 07, The Foster Care System and the Courts, Part V. Seal struggled as he was taken to the shelter van. Now, the man who was dragging him along said, "There's no reason for you to act this way. You're only going to stay with the Clayworths until a more suitable arrangement can be made." "I told you," Seal complained, "I belong with my butler. Why can't you idiots understand that? If the courts decide that that is so, then you will be returned to his custody," the man told Seal. "Until then, the Clayworth home will be a much nicer place for you to wait than the shelter." "Any place that doesn't have my butler in it sucks," Seal commented. "You have a very unhealthy obsession with your so-called butler," the man decided, aloud. "Don't worry, it's quite common in young people who have been victimized by—" "You're disgusting," Seal told him, angrily. "Sebastian has never harmed me. Even when I've slapped him for not obeying my orders, he's never slapped me back or raised his voice to me. He's a good man." "I'm sorry," the worker apologized. Guess I'm just used to seeing so many abuse victims that I just take it for granted. If your friend Sebastian is a good man like you say, then I'm sure you and he will be back together in no time." "I hope so," Seal sighed, as he stopped struggling and stood there next to the van. "I suppose it won't hurt to stay at the Clayworths for a few days until Sebastian can straighten things out." "And who knows," the worker encouraged, "you might make a friend or two while you're there." Seal stepped into the van and sat down, allowing the worker to strap him in. He watched the sights outside his window until they arrived at an apartment building on Duncan Terrace. "Wait here," the worker said, as he got out of the car and went to ring the doorbell. Seal glared. He couldn't believe he was being forced to stay in some stupid minuscule apartment. Well, it would have to do until Sebastian could get things sorted out. Still, it irked him sometimes that he and Sebastian couldn't just use their demonic powers openly. No, Sebastian would not have it. He wanted Seal to have real friends, not just people who pretended to be his friend because he had power. "What about us?" Seal had asked. "Do you think I pretended to be your friend?" "You never pretended that," Sebastian had replied. "You were first and foremost, in the beginning, my master. But you have become my friend." Seal had given him a rare smile which the younger demon now remembered as he was waved out of the van by the worker who was standing on the doorstep talking to a woman in her 30s who was waving and smiling at him. Rolling his eyes in irritation, Seal left the van and joined the worker and Mrs. Clayworth. Chapter 08, Short Side Story, Devon and Grell Reminiscing. Grell smiled as Devon opened the oven and the fresh aroma of a nicely cooked meal filled the room. He didn't need to actually eat, and taste had become bland to him for the longest time. Devon had reawakened his awareness to taste early in their relationship. "So, what are we having tonight?" "Rib roast," Devon told him as he set the meal down on the hot pot in the middle of the table. "Nice and rare, the way you like it. Now, come and eat." Grell's eyes gleamed with hunger as he sat on the chair next to Devon's and helped himself to a thick slice of the roast. "Grell," Devon asked, "do you remember how we met?" Grell nodded. "I had come to reap your soul." Flashback. Grell Sutcliffe spotted the man whose soul he had been sent to retrieve. He revved up his chainsaw and raced toward the man, just as the man turned in his direction. There was no fear in his eyes, which were blue and gazed at Grell from beneath a shock of hair which, unlike most of the man's blonde hair, was a beautiful shade of red. Instead he was smiling. "I never dreamed that my death would be at the hands of one so beautiful," he had said, simply. Grell lowered his chainsaw in astonishment. He had been called many things by those he had been sent to retrieve in the past. But this was the first time any of them had called him beautiful. His eyes lit up and for the first time since he'd become a reaper, he felt a prickle of tears. "I can't do it," he told Devon. "I can't kill you. Can you marry me?" Devon had asked him, unexpectedly. Grell stared at him in amazement. "Do you believe in love at first sight?" Devon asked, taking his hands and causing him to drop the chainsaw. "Do you believe that fate can bring two people together who are perfect for each other?" "I do. I believe that's what happened right here. Right now. Marry me, my beautiful deadly one. Please say you will." And flashback. Grell smiled. "I still can't believe I said yes. I was so wild back then. I thought no one would ever tame me. And somehow, there you were, saying everything I'd always wanted to hear." Devon smiled back. "And you are as beautiful to me today as you were when we first met. Just think, someday soon, we'll even have a family."